going to continue with the foundation of Mindfulness Sutra, and then we're going to look at a couple of techniques that talk about, that help us maybe define the zero social distance or the zero self-distance. Okay. It might be useful also to consider why we're doing this in a larger context. Foundation of Mindfulness Sutra extracts from the foundation of mindfulness. Okay, this is the only way, monks, for the perfection of being, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the destruction of suffering and grief, for reaching the right path, for the attainment of nirvana, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Now, it's quite a mouthful. Basically, it's saying this is the way to achieve a state of bliss, happiness that is indisputable, indestructible, dependable. Four foundations. Herein in this teaching, a monk lives contemplating the body and the body, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having overcome in this world covetousness and grief. And then it repeats this: the body, feeling, consciousness, and contemplating mental objects. Those are the four. So the foundation of Mindfulness Sutra then goes into the contemplation of the body, contemplation of feeling, contemplation of consciousness, and the contemplation of mental objects. And by contemplation, it means check it out yourself. So if you memorize this and then went through it mentally as you are sitting, Now nowadays we actually have a recording device, so you can put this to some kind of recording and listen to it, and as you're listening to it, you meditate. So it's like a guided meditation. But that's quite good if you've got meditation, you've got headphones, because the sound and the voice, and if you've recorded it, it's your voice inside your own mind. Because of that, we've got zero social distance. You're not going to object to the person who's talking because it's you. Now, if you've read this, and you've recorded this, and you kind of don't object to it, it means that there's no separation. So the voice that you hear is your mind, and you accept what it's saying, and you're checking internally whether it's the case. But the way that you do it is you're meant to contemplate these things ardent, that is, with energy, clearly comprehending and mindful, being aware, having overcome in this world covetousness and grief. You're not trying to do it, and you're not complaining about the fact you haven't got it either. So you've reached some kind of, you're trying to be energyful without wanting some extra state, or without complaining about not attaining it. Okay. The contemplation of the body. I have recorded 6 of them here: mindfulness of breathing, postures of the body, mindfulness with clear comprehension, reflections on the repulsiveness of the body, reflections on the material elements, and the 9 symmetry contemplations. Now these might sound like quite complicated things, aspects of the body, but it is quite you can check, obviously, that you are breathing. Okay, so all you're doing is you're attending to breathing. That's usually the starting point of any kind of mindful practice. Postures of the body. Postures as in, I know when I'm going, I know when I'm standing, I know when I'm sitting, I know that when I'm lying down, I'm lying down. The point about that is to be aware that one is doing whatever it is that one's doing. I'm standing and I'm aware that I'm standing. And that's it. Okay, but to do that with breathing, to do that with standing, to do that with clear comprehension, which is when bending and stretching, applies clear comprehension, when wearing robes, carrying the bowl, when eating and drinking, i.e. whenever it is that you're doing anything, you're aware that you're doing it. Reflections on the repulsiveness, to think about all the different aspects of the body, skin, the hair of the body, the nails, the teeth, the skin, the flesh, the spleen, the lungs, the intestines, nasal, mucus, urine. All of these aspects of the body are physical, and to be aware of those. Reflections on the material elements, the earth, the water, the fire, the wind. We're talking about the different systems in that case. Okay, because remember, this is quite a few thousand years old, and it might have been updated a little regarding, for example, the spleen, the midriff, the liver. Might not be known 2,600 years ago. Similarly, with the material elements, we don't know about, for example, the nervous system or the circulatory system. And that's what I think what these are referring to, the earth, like the bones, and the material aspect. Elements of water is more like the blood system. Element of fire, maybe the electric, the nervous system, and the element of wind, that's the breathing pulmonary system. I don't know, but the last aspect is the 9 synatory contemplations. And this was quite an interesting one because it says, further monks, as if a monk sees a body 1, 2, or 3 days, swollen and blue and festering. He then applies this perception to his own body. Verily, this is my body of the same nature, such it will become, and I shall not escape it. And he does this with internally body, external, origination. Right. So he talks about the 9 symmetry contemplations, talking about death and seeing the body decompose over the days, the weeks, the months, the years, till it's like just the bones, and then the bones dissolve to dust. To contemplate that, one's own physical existence. Sure, it does something to the psychology. Now, the interesting bit that I'd like to draw attention to, which starts talking about a kind of structure, a process, why are we doing this? What's its potential effect of exercising one's mind? Remember, this is imaginative. It's not that you actually see a body, it's that you imagine, and if you have seen a body, to actually go, right, that's what happened to my body. We're imagining these practices, so it's like a mental yoga, a psychic yoga. Okay, so thus, and have a look at this structure. This structure is quite interesting. Thus, he lives contemplating the body in the body, internally. Okay. Or he lives contemplating the body in the body, externally. We're in the body internally. We're also observing it as if externally. So we imagine, for example, our hand, and we actually look at it from the outside, but we also have the sense of our hand, and we can sense it from the inside. Both of those are internal. So he lives contemplating the body in the body, internally, feeling of the hand, feeling of your body as you're sitting or you're standing, as I am, for example, standing with my weight on the ground. Or he lives contemplating the body in the body, externally, i.e. the fact that I am standing where I am, and it's my body on top of the floor. Or he lives contemplating the body in the body, internally and externally. So it's this and that, so both. I mean, you might want to think about it like that. Okay, you might want to think about it like that. And then you're thinking about both. He lives contemplating origination factors in the body. That is, how does that sensation arise? The fact that, for example, if you're meditating, I have eczema. Sometimes my skin, quite often, is causing disturbance. Actually, I'll talk a little bit about that. Skin. Why I am who I am. And I've engaged other people who have also eczema, and it brings them to a certain level of presence, let's say, involuntarily. throughout their lives. And so if sitting quietly meditating, you can kind of feel a sensation arise of discomfort, for example, in your bones. You might be in your sitting position, you think, oh, my foot, it's on the other foot. I'm starting to feel a bit tingling, it's quite painful, I'll change my position. The idea is you don't change your position. You're just aware of it happening, it increases, and after a little while, it passes. Or you get a itch, you go, got to do something about that. It really feels as if I want to itch that. You wait for a bit, the itch really increases, and then eventually fades away. And that's what we're talking about here. So, the body, right, he lives, you live, we live, an individual lives, contemplating origination factors in the body, how it originates in sensations within the body, or he lives contemplating dissolution factors in the body, or he lives contemplating origination and dissolution factors in the body. And it's quite easy to think about, and I think I've heard people talk about this metaphor like a cloud. So the cloud manifests, there's nothing there, and then the cloud just kind of grows, and there's a cloud, and then the cloud kind of disappears, and it's gone. Okay, and it's like that, but within the body, sensations. Now, this might be a little bit too subtle at this stage, maybe, or too much for. I'm going to do it. Potentially, it's like time, and we have the origination of something and the dissolution of something. From zero, it becomes something, and then at some stage or other, we feel it. So at the beginning, we go, oh, nothing, and then we go, feeling. It's like a threshold. It's like the minimum. At some point or other, there was something happening, but it takes a little while before there's enough of it that you become aware. And then, as soon as you become aware of it consciously, you go, oh, good grief. And then maybe it gets to a point where it's like, oh, I really don't want this, or I really do like this. It's something quite more extreme, and you kind of want to act on it. Okay, the max, it's like, I want to do something. And again, you don't do anything about it. And then you wait, and it disappears off. Now, the origination you think is in time is just a period before and then after. But what we're actually, I think what it's actually saying, you might not like this. A lot of people, this is the kind of thing, it's like, are you sure of it? It's like, no. If you take, if you differentiate this, what happens is, at that point there, the vector direction is quite low. Here, it's quite high. Here, it's like that, and then it goes down, and eventually it flattens off again. Okay? And it's the rate of change. And the rate of change, you can get an equation that if you can write an expression for the rate of change as it goes through time. And so, it's possible, if you know what the equation is, to plot out the entire thing. At any moment, you can calculate it. And it's the same calculation, which is to say, the origination is not just something that happened to start to get there. The origination and the dissolution factors are in action at all moments. So there's more origination in the beginning than there is at the end, but there is more dissolution in the end. But there's still dissolution. If you think about it, it's kind of like high origination and low dissolution. Okay, and at this point, maybe the dissolution and the origination are equal, and then at this point, the origination and the dissolution, is smaller. Okay, and so at any moment you can kind of see, is this thing growing or is this thing disappearing? What's its state? What's the phenomenon of this? Okay, so the reason why we want to consider this is because it says he contemplates origination factors in the body, where he lives contemplating dissolution factors in the body, or he lives contemplating origination and dissolution factors in the body. Hence this interpretation that there's actually both the origination and the dissolution at the same time. At any moment, there is a relationship of these two. Okay? They're both happening. Or his mindfulness is established with the thought the body exists. It's quite interesting because now this is no longer just about observation. Or his mindfulness is established. So you're either thinking about the bodies and, internally, externally. No, we're going to think about both at the same time. We're going to think about, oh, it's starting, it's kind of depleting, it's kind of both. Or mindfulness is established with the thought the body exists. That's quite a nice, tiny kind of like observation. The body exists, which is related in some way or other to Dzogchen, having overcome, the sickness of effort. One realizes, I'm in the self-perfected state. And so it's a metacognitive state of the body exists. To the extent necessary, just for knowledge and mindfulness, and he lives detached and clings to naught in the world. So the idea is that you get into that state where you establish the body exists. And this is done after each of the practices before. The body exists. Okay? And just enough to go, okay, it exists. It's like, another way that I like to think about it is, you talk about the river passing, it's always moving, and you're putting your fingerprint on it. And because it's water, it's not going to actually keep the fingerprint. But it really is the lightest touch of your mind. The body exists. The lightest awareness. So it does say knowledge, but we're not talking about objective knowledge. We're not talking about knowing something. It's just a matter of being aware of. Okay, the body exists. For knowledge and for mindfulness. Okay, awareness and knowledge maybe. Okay. The body exists just to be cognizant of it in some form. Well, metacognitive. Well, metaphysical. Okay. And he lives detached and clings to naught in the world. And so by doing this, likely, you're effectively equals detached. Okay, so you're not caught by it, dragged, kicking and screaming by the sensation. Now this is no simple thing. Okay, so we can be aware of it and we can do it in a comfortable state, but you can test it. And they do test the Buddhists by, for example, I think in the Tibetans, I think they take them up to the ice fields and put ice packs on their back, so they're freezing. And it's like feeling that sensation, going, okay, I get the sensation. Oh yes, there's ice. Oh yeah, that's fine. The origination of the feeling. Oh yeah, the dissolution. Oh, okay, and it's like both. It exists. It's fine. That's what it is. Without running away from it, or if it was a pleasurable thing, running towards it. Okay. Which reminds us of the original attitude, which is contemplating the mental objects or bodily feelings ardent, that is alive, clearly comprehending as in knowledge, i.e. you know what it is, you recognize it, and you're aware of it. So it's something you've already experienced before, and you're okay with that, and you're aware of its current experience now. Okay? So the awareness is like now, and knowledge is like, yeah, I've already known, because that's what's happening in your brain. Okay? So you're aware and you're awake, and you've got kind of spiritual energy of some kind, the body exists, and mindful, having overcome in this world covetousness and grief, i.e. we're not attracted to it and we're not running away from it. It just is. The body exists. Fine. So we have that, the contemplation of the body. Now if you develop that, you go on to the next, the contemplation of feeling. And how monks does a monk live contemplating feelings and feelings? Okay, so that's body. And feelings. And there's a list of feelings. Herein monks, a monk, or a person, when experiencing a pleasant feeling, knows, I experience a pleasant feeling. When experiencing a painful feeling, he knows, I experience a painful feeling. When experiencing a neither pleasant nor painful experience, he knows, I experience neither a pleasant nor painful feeling. And so on and so forth. Okay? So it's when feelings, so right now, well, we're talking about pleasant feelings, we're talking about worldly feelings, for example, pleasure, I guess. Well, pleasant feelings are more like pleasure. Worldly feelings, like hunger, I guess. We're experiencing spiritual feelings. Worldly, so pleasant or painful experience. Worldly experiences spiritual feelings. Painful worldly, painful spiritual experience. Neither pleasant or painful worldly, or neither pleasant or right. Okay, so we're talking about pleasant or painful, and then worldly, and spiritual. Okay, so that's plus and negative, plus and negative, plus and negative. Okay, so you do both or neither. Okay, or neither. 0, 0, 0. Okay. So whatever sensation that you've got, because of earlier the day before you sit down, you're having a little meditation, these feelings might still be present in you, or the memory of them might actually trigger, and you'll have these feelings. Or when you're actually listening to this, when it said, I experience a painful feeling, go, oh yeah, I can locate one right now. And if you're meditating and cross-legged after a while, it's like, that's what it is. It might be a small painful feeling, but you're like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Is there a pleasant one? And then you might have to imagine that. Okay, so you're kind of doing a little bit of yoga, going through what these things are, either physically right now, or you're imagining what they are, you're recalling what they are. Remember, we're allowed to access what we already know. So it's either something that we're aware of right now happening, or it's something that we already know. And similarly then, that finishes with, he lives contemplating feeling and feelings internally. So it's not about the body, this is now about the feelings, sensations that are not based on physical sensory experience. Pleasant, painful, that's kind of related to the physical. Worldly, I think we're talking about hunger and thirst and so on and so forth. And spiritual feelings. So for example, when you're listening to, best way to think about that maybe is when you're thinking about different kinds of music. And there are certain music that makes you bounce, 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 bounce. And that's somewhere here, maybe worldly. And then there are some kinds of music that lift some aspect of you, so violins like Sqale, Albinoni, Adagio. And it's just like lifting your soul. Okay, that's the phrase we might have. But you can actually get this sensation. Now it is partly a body sensation, but it's some aspect of us which is emergent on that. And it's potentially, for example, sad. Okay, we feel this kind of compassion or sadness. It might arise and we feel that. So it's more like a spiritual than it is a worldly experience. So when we're doing it, it lives contemplating feeling and feeling internally, okay, or externally. It's either a thing that you're in it and you really feel it, the spiritual, for example, sensation when you listen to the music, or the fact you're aware that you're feeling it, that there is a feeling occurring, as if almost as another person. And he lives, or maybe it's more like a memory, actually, when I think about it now. It's actually, you're feeling it now, or it's something that you already had a memory of it, and so really, it's an external feeling. You remember the memory of it, so it's a bit like you're outside of it, kind of. He lives contemplating origination factors in these feelings, or the dissolution, or he lives contemplating origination, dissolution factors in the feeling of feelings, not sensations and bodies. Whereas mindfulness is established with a thought, feelings exist. Just like this formula, feelings exist. To the extent necessary just for knowledge and mindfulness, knowledge and mindfulness. And knowledge comes first because it's actually something that we've already experienced before. Knowledge, referring to something that's already in the past, and awareness. So the order there, I think, is probably more correct. And he lives detached and clings to naught in the world. Detached again, pulling to or from. Right, so the contemplation of feeling, and then it's the contemplation of consciousness. These are different things. The body, we've gone through that. Feelings, these are different aspects of being. Consciousness, okay. I would have thought you would have thought consciousness is last, but it's not. They put it third. Okay, so the contemplation of consciousness. Now you've got these phrases, and these may be a little bit trickier. We can just about interpret these and guess what they are. And that's the idea. I like this way of doing it. I mean, if you've got any kind of Buddhist practice, you know about this because you've been through this, and you run through this, and so on and so forth. Whereas I like the idea of just guessing, because if the Buddhist method is correct, it's referring to things that you already have. So the trick is to try to, instead of people tell you what it is, try and guess from your own experience what they are. This one gets a little bit tricky, so it might require a bit more guidance. How amongst does a monk live contemplating consciousness in consciousness? And it goes through quite a few of these. I'm going to write all these up, but here's a few. Here in monks, a monk knows the consciousness with lust as with lust. So it hasn't put it as a feeling. The consciousness with hate as with hate. The consciousness without hate as without hate. The consciousness with ignorance as with ignorance. The consciousness without ignorance as without ignorance. So we've got lust. Okay, and that was quite an easy one, because we know when we kind of get sexually aroused. I would have thought that's more like a pleasant worldly feeling, but okay, let's just consider this is, remember, this is the consciousness that has this feeling. Okay, so it's not the fact that the feeling, we've already gone through the feeling potentially of what lust is. The trick is notice the consciousness with lust, i.e. with this feeling. It's the metacognitive state, or what's the effect on the emergent state of consciousness if I'm feeling these things. So basically, when you're doing this, I'm just guessing, you consider lust, and you kind of give yourself a moment to go, lust, come up with a mental object, and you go, oh, okay, and something will start to happen. You're going to get the origination of the sensation. But the trick is to recognize that's it now, and now get rid of that. So you've got a sense of it, and now get rid of it. And then you go, what's that then? What's the state of consciousness now? And so it's almost like it's not quite like this, but you're shining a light, and it's red. You flick it to red, you go, ooh, you can see the red things. And then you flick it off back to white, and you're like, okay, red, and then white. Red, and then white. Or, in fact, it's light, and then kind of no light. What's the effect on the lighting? Okay, that metaphor doesn't quite work. But hate, so you kind of think of something and start to induce hate, and then you go, right, and then get rid of it. And what's the sensation that one has? Sensation not of hate, but what's the effect on your being at a deeper or higher level when you consider this. Okay, those ones are relatively easy. The lust, the hate, the ignorance. Ignorance is not being aware of something or wrong knowledge. The shrunken state of consciousness is the shrunken state. I'm not going to go through these, but you can kind of guess. Well, try to guess. Shrunken state of consciousness, when you're kind of a bit like under pressure almost, and almost like in a state of defeatedness. The distracted state of consciousness. We know about that because our world really does distract us. So you're thinking about something else, you're off to something else, you're right, as opposed to a single-pointed attention or a more softer approach. Distraction, developed state of consciousness. Oh, developed state, that sounds quite nice. Undeveloped. This is an interesting one. The state of consciousness with some other state superior to it, as the state with something mentally higher. So it's like a child kind of getting a glimmer of an adult and going, there's something going on here which is beyond my capacity to be aware of, but kind of just got a glimmer of it. It's a bit like that. Okay? Or recognizing that there are people that are more aware, or that there are mental states that you're capable of that you felt at certain days. It was just like, wow, you really feel on top of things, you really do. You're fresh, you can deal with anything. Okay, that's a higher mental state. State of consciousness with no other state superior to it. Okay, with no other state superior to it. Nothing mentally higher. Wow, right, on top of things. Concentrated state, and then the unconcentrated state. Now, the concentrated state is like following something, just one thing. And sometimes I get into that. You're really just doing something, or you're in the zone with tennis, or with me, maybe it's Tai Chi, or carving something up, not drawing, but I don't know, actually very few things I really concentrate on. Or you're in the unconcentrated state, you're just kind of soft focus. So focus singular, soft focus. The freed state of consciousness, that's the freed state, and the unfreed state. Now the sequence of that goes from lust all the way to unfreed state of consciousness. The freed state of consciousness, to be free, to be open, as opposed to, oh, I'm actually contained. So there's all of those, and yet again it goes to the consciousness exists. Contemplates internal, external states of consciousness, and then it's the origination, dissolution states of consciousness, and then it's the consciousness exists. Consciousness is established with the thought consciousness exists to the extent necessary just for knowledge and mindfulness, and he lives detached and clings to naught in the world. Okay, so imagine if you manage to go through your body and it's somehow or other calm, and you've come to understand it, and you're no longer bothered by it, and you're no longer attracted by it, you're not following the urges of it and sensations. Urges of feelings, rising and falling, you're okay with that, they're coming and going, doesn't matter, it's okay. Consciousness, the state, am I confident or not confident, or all that, that's what I think the shrunken state is, confidence. And so we've managed to kind of settle on those. We're not thinking about internally, externally, both. Origination, dissolution, kind of like, doesn't matter what it is, it's fine, it's good, it's kind of calmed. And then we're into the feelings, and then we're into the detached aspect. That is, I recognize these, doesn't worry me, and I'm aware of them as they arise and dissolve. Okay, we're holding it very lightly, very, very lightly. It's lightly, so it's not you're gripping onto any of this stuff, it's just that you're aware. It's just got the slightest awareness of all these things. Okay, metacognitive state. And then it goes into the contemplation of mental objects. And you're thinking, wow, okay. It's going to go on for a little bit more. I'm just going to pause this for a second.